And joining us now from Washington is NBC's Ali Rafa. We are also joined by Michael Steele, former RNC chairman and MSNBC political analyst, and Cristobal Alex, former senior advisor to the Biden campaign. Great to have all of you here, Ali. Let's start with the reporting. What more do we know about the president's campaign plans?
Yeah, Anna, good morning. Well, for months and months now, the looming question over this White House wasn't if, but rather when the president would announce these re-election plans. And now we're learning, as you mentioned, we could expect this announcement to come as soon as Tuesday in the form of possibly a video announcement. And if this indeed does happen on Tuesday, that would sort of track with this pattern that we've seen from President Biden. He's very superstitious, very sensitive around the anniversaries of certain dates. And Tuesday, the 25th, would mark 4 years exactly since he launched his successful presidential bid. It's also around the time that former President Obama announced he would be running for re-election. And we're learning this morning, which sort of completes this puzzle, that he will on Tuesday be speaking to a trade union conference here in D.C. Of course, we know President Biden, a very passionate supporter of unions, so that would fit with this broader puzzle of this re-election announcement. But of course, Anna, with anything related to President Biden, we have to caution that until he officially says this is a go and green lights this, we are still in a holding pattern for these re-election announcement plans, Anna.
Okay, Ali, we know you will. Keep us posted, of course. Let me ask you, Michael, a Tuesday announcement would be exactly 4 years after Biden announced his 2020 run, as we mentioned, but it's different this time, right? He is the incumbent president. How is it different campaigning as the incumbent president versus running as a presidential hopeful?
Well, the energy is different, first off. He is the incumbent. That means that there are certain things that are going to be readily available to him because he is the president that he didn't necessarily have 4 years ago when he was in a primary and the party was, trying to be fair to everybody, and the landscape was very different. So now he can begin to consolidate core aspects of ramping up his campaign, the organization on the ground, the identification of bundlers and fundraising in the efforts where to target, when to target, and then also the messaging. He begins to set the tone for what a second Biden term will look like in the face of global concerns, economic uncertainty. All these things now take on a different patina. They sound a little bit different. They message a little bit different because you're not just talking about what I'm doing at the moment, but what I'm going to be doing over the next 4 years, starting in 2025.
Does the timing make sense to you, Cristobal? Why now for an announcement versus waiting a bit longer and maybe staying out of the dogfight for just a little bit longer?
Yeah, great to be with you, Anna. And that is the exact right question. And as we heard, nothing official until President Biden himself announces it. But I wouldn't be surprised to see him launch on the anniversary. Again, that's a very important date. It means a lot to folks who have supported him from many, many years ago. And I like the superstition around it, to be perfectly honest. And remember, the threat posed to our nation that caused President Biden to run in the first place hasn't been extinguished. The white supremacist rally in Charlottesville was a major reason he got into the race. Remember, Trump stunned the world when a peaceful protester was killed, and he said there were very fine people on both sides. Trump assigned a moral equivalence between the spreading of hate and those that were standing against that. And that meant something very deeply to President Biden. And that threat still looms. We've seen book banning, the Supreme Court taking away a fundamental constitutional right in Dobbs. Country's still on this precipice, and all of that, we could lose all of that with the reelection of Donald Trump or someone like a DeSantis. So the time, if not this Tuesday, I would expect it relatively soon because there's just so much work to do to build a presidential campaign, to make sure you develop this echo chamber, and to really talk about the historic presidency that we've seen under Joe Biden. Remember, inheriting a country coming out of an insurrection, a global pandemic, and rebuilding the economy, creating 12 million new jobs, uniting the world against Russia, and protecting our national security. I mean, those are some very, very important things that he can run on. And now we need to tell that story, and a campaign can do that.
And yet, Cristobal, it wasn't, that long ago, members of the Democratic Party were questioning whether President Biden should run again. In fact, it was an Associated Press poll just this past February that found just 37% of Democrats said they wanted him to seek a second term. How big of a concern is that for your party?
Honestly, I don't see that as a concern at all. The polls can be a little bit difficult to understand when you don't have an opponent, right? We don't have a clear opponent on the other side yet. The Republicans are going to beat themselves up. It's going to be a bloodbath with DeSantis and Trump and others, and we already see where that's headed. But once that solidifies, Americans are going to see a clear choice between Joe Biden, who fights for American families every single day, and Donald Trump or DeSantis or whatever right-wing MAGA type you've got on the other side. And once they see that, the polling will shift dramatically. Remember, when Ronald Reagan, prior to his reelection, his poll numbers were much lower than Joe Biden's are today, and then he dominated in his reelection. So I'm not worried about those numbers. There's a lot of enthusiasm and excitement right now for Joe Biden to get into this race.
Do you think, real quick, just before I bring Michael back in here, do you think that we're going to see any Democratic infighting, given there are a couple of other challengers who've thrown their hat in the ring when you talk about Marianne Williamson and RFK Jr.?
I saw that RFK Jr. announcement the other day, and it reminded me of that episode in Succession when Connor wanted to get 1%. I think it's going to be something like that. There's nobody real out there. The party's united behind Joe Biden, and for good reason. He's had a historic presidency, and he can win.
Michael, a new Wall Street Journal poll finds Trump is still dominating the Republican field among likely GOP primary voters. I don't think that's a huge surprise. But what's interesting is the dynamics that we're seeing in some of the changes when it comes to what is believed to be his closest challenger, although Governor Ron DeSantis hasn't formally announced his bid yet. But you see now he's leading DeSantis by 24 points. Nikki Haley there with 5%, Tim Scott with 3%. What do those numbers tell you?
Tells me that unless DeSantis, Haley, Scott, and anyone else decides that they actually want to take Donald Trump on, the number they see is the number they're going to get. Donald Trump is the titular head of the Republican Party, has been since 2016. He remains a formidable force within the party because he controls the political apparatus, the RNC. He controls the ground operations across the states. The base is solidified behind him. We saw that on the indictment when he went up in favorability among Republicans for re-election.
So you think the charges are helping him politically?
Absolutely they are. Absolutely they are. I mean, when you're P.T. Barnum, you can make anything work for you, right? And as Donald Trump knows, every time, no matter the news, if you're talking about me, that's a good day for me. And that's how Donald Trump marinates the sauce every single day. He has been a constant fixture in our political life, our cultural life, our economic life. He's a part of every conversation for the last 7 years. No one inside the GOP has been able to break that. I don't see any of the faces on this screen breaking that now. They don't have what it takes to go up against a guy who doesn't give a damn. And that's a hard challenge. When you're up against an opponent who will swing regardless, there are no lines, there are no borders, there are no rules. That's a different kind of fight. And I don't see DeSantis and all of his, look, DeSantis showed me his thing with Mickey. So if you can't take down Mickey Mouse, baby, Donald Trump's got something for you. So, yeah, that's the state of the play right now. This race is setting up to be a repeat of 2020.